So, being a student at the University of South Carolina is an amazing experience, and all students work extremely hard in order to get a job and be successful post graduation. I've been motivated by the faculty, and they're all very encouraging when talking about the future. But when thinking about looking for jobs, there's an issue. I've worked just as hard in my college career as the male students here, but am I going to be paid less in my job solely because I'm a female? Over the past several decades, women have worked extremely hard to be treated as equals to men and to put an end to gender discrimination. However, even with the many successes, there's still one problem that is prevalent in everyday life: the gender wage gap. This is a persistent fact among the United States, as well as countries like Japan and Denmark, that women earn less money than men. There's no debate that the gender wage gap exists because statistics show the reality, and there needs to be a change in policy by the United States government to ensure that women are treated equally and fairly in all areas of the workforce. According to the American Association of University Women, women working full-time in the United States are typically paid just 80% of what men are paid, resulting in a 20% gap. The gap has narrowed since the 1970s because of women's progress in education and their increase in women's participation in the workforce, but the gap seems to be at a standstill. At the rate of change from 1960 to 2016, the gap is expected to go away in 2059. However, progress has slowed, and it is more probable that women will not reach the pay equity with men until 2119. So, for a woman who is equally as qualified as a man, working the exact same job only earns 80% of what a man makes. This is not right, and it's not acceptable. The gap in earnings can translate into $10,086 less per year in median earnings for women. When looking at reasons why there's a gap, there's an all too common response saying it's a byproduct of the choices women make. Whether it's the choice to work fewer hours, take on lower paying jobs, or to opt out of the workforce for longer periods of time, this framework can make it easy for people to dismiss the policies and legislation. The evidence shows this problem is much more than a personal choice. More accurate causes of the wage gap are that women are overrepresented in low-wage jobs and underrepresented in high-wage ones. Also, work is devalued because women do it, and caregivers are discriminated against, which all result in lower pay. Vox says a 2009 study led by the University of Chicago reports that the gender wage gap is mostly a penalty for bearing children. There are sharp declines in women's earnings post-childbirth, but men's earnings stay the same. This is just not right, and a woman having a child should not have it impact their salary. Other aspects of life also impact the wage gap, such as education level. The Economic Policy Institute states that women earn less than men at every education level, especially as the education level increases. It is known that earnings increase as years of education do for both men and women. However, this is not effective against a gender pay gap because in some cases, the pay gap is larger at higher levels of education. Education helps increase earnings for women, but still leaves a gap between men. The National Women's Law Center explains the many subcategories of women that the wage gap impacts. Black, Latina, and Native women experience even more discrimination in the workforce and make around only 58 cents for every dollar paid to their white male counterparts. The gap also increases for mothers, women of old age, and with disabilities. There clearly needs to be a change because the gap is a persistent problem that has seemed to come to a plateau. Before thinking about a change in policy, Forbes suggests two easy and cost-free ways to eliminate the gap. The first is to implement pay transparency, which would let everyone know what their colleagues were earning and would allow women to be aware if they're making less than their male counterparts. This would also allow men to see the inequality, and they might be just as upset and even more aware of the inequality. The next solution would be to eliminate negotiation. Studies show that women do not perform as well as men in negotiations, which gives men a better opportunity to negotiate for a higher salary. These free options could easily be implemented into the working world, but some may not comply if they're not required. A change in policy is truly the only way to ensure the gap is eliminated and men and women are compensated equally. To achieve equal pay, the US government needs to strengthen the equal pay laws so that women are better able to fight back against pay discrimination. Many states have passed the Equal Rights Amendment to ensure women are treated equally and fairly in all areas, including the workforce. However, the ERA has not received the ratification required to become a law, which is what is needed. Specifically, the Fairness Act would improve the scope of the currently existing Equal Pay Act, which has not been updated since 1963. There would be stronger incentives for employers to follow the law, enhance federal enforcement efforts, and would prohibit retaliation against workers asking about wage practices. It is essential that stricter policies are put into place and enforced to make sure that something that I think is a basic principle of our society is achieved. So thank you, and is there any questions?
So like, I was just out of curiosity, where like do you think specifically this age gap, or excuse me, just the wage gap is like they're seeing problems with that most?
So I was looking, and kind of with education level, it started out with like people that earn minimum wage. The gap was not as small or not as large. And then once bachelor's degree, master's, doctor, it kind of increased. So I think it's the education level that really, what men and women with the same education level, they should be working the same job, they should be getting paid the same, but they're just not.
Yeah, no, yeah, totally. Yeah, I was just curious, like where specifically in certain fields or whatever. But yeah, no, totally agree.
Do you think things could translate to underdeveloped countries, or do you think it's a whole separate problem?
I think so. I mean, there's in other countries too. I mean, Japan and Denmark are developed, but I mean, I was just kind of focusing on the United States. Just from me and all of us, like we're all in college about to enter the workforce. So that's kind of what more I was thinking about.
I just, to put it bluntly, I just feel like that sucks that like if I go to school after this and just keep getting more degrees and I'm up for a job with someone else and we do the exact same thing, it just sucks that I wouldn't be paid as much even though we do the same amount of work every single day.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And like I said, I feel like when you're in college, everyone and adults talk to you and you just get so excited to like get in the real world and, work a real job. But then when you have you might not make as much as you should just because you're a woman, that's not encouraging whatsoever.
I don't know if you already mentioned this, but are there any companies that are setting good examples and are actually giving men and women equal wages?
I did not. I don't know the exact company, but when I was researching, it did say that in one company, men, I guess, somehow found out that women were not being compensated like they should be, and there was a big gap. And the men were angry, so then they decided, I'm not sure if it was the company who filled the gap and paid them for what they should have gotten or the actual, workers. But, men are aware of it and companies should be aware of it. So Is there any other?
Well, I kind of missed your whole discussion, but I was just sitting here thinking, do you think this has something to do with like fields that are dominated by women, like nursing and teaching, with how much they're paid? Do you think that they should probably be paid more?
Yeah, there's definitely, I think there's a lot of women working in, like I said, the caregiver industry. So that's like nursing, teaching. And those teachers typically have lower salaries, but I think that is a problem. They're working in, it kind of depends on the industry. So, but I definitely think some women tend to work in the caregiver industry. Anything else? All right, thanks for listening.